that Jean-Luc Brunel's MC2 modeling agency was also supplying girls to Epstein. In May 2006, Palm Beach police filed a probable cause affidavit stating that Epstein should be charged with 4 counts of unlawful sex with minors and 1 count of sexual abuse. After press reports surfaced that Epstein would be charged with 1 count of aggravated assault with no intent to commit a felony, Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Rita, who was instrumental in bringing in the FBI, accused the Palm Beach County State Prosecutor Barry Krischer of being too lenient on Epstein. Krischer then convened a Palm Beach County grand jury, a practice which was usually only done in capital cases. Presenting evidence from only 2 victims, the grand jury ended up returning only a single charge of felony solicitation of prostitution, to which Epstein pleaded not guilty to in August 2006. However, during July 2006, the FBI began its own investigation of Epstein, which was nicknamed Operation Leap Year. It resulted in a 53-page indictment in June 2007 that was never presented to a grand jury. Alexander Acosta, then the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, agreed to a plea deal, which Epstein's attorney Alan Dershowitz helped to negotiate, to grant Epstein from immunity from all federal criminal charges, along with 4 named co-conspirators and any unnamed potential co-conspirators. The Miami Herald reported that the non-prosecution agreement essentially shut down an ongoing FBI probe into whether there were more victims and other powerful people who took part in Epstein's sex crimes. Florida DA Acosta later said he offered a lenient plea deal because he was informed that Epstein belonged to intelligence, that he was above his pay grade, and to leave it alone. Epstein agreed to plead guilty in Florida state court to 2 felony prostitution charges, registered as a sex offender, and paid restitution to 3 dozen victims identified by the FBI. The plea deal was later called a sweetheart deal. Later on, a federal judge found that the prosecutors had violated the victims' rights. On June 30, 2008, Epstein pleaded guilty to one of the 2 state charges of procuring for prostitution from a girl who was below the age of 18. Epstein was sentenced to 18 months in prison. While most convicted sex offenders in Florida are sent to state prison, Epstein was instead housed in a private wing of the Palm Beach County Stockade. According to the sheriff's office, after 3.5 months, Epstein was allowed to leave the jail on work release for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. This disobeyed the sheriff's own policies, requiring a maximum remaining sentence of 10 months and making sex offenders ineligible for the privilege. Epstein's sentence was a far cry from punishment. His cell door was left unlocked, and he had access to the attorney room, where a television was installed for him before he was moved to the stockade's previously unstaffed infirmary. Epstein worked at the office of a foundation he had created before reporting to jail. This foundation was dissolved after he had served his time. While serving his sentence, the sheriff's office received $128,000 from Epstein's non-profit to cover the costs of extra services that were being provided during his work release. His office was monitored by permit deputies whose overtime was paid by Epstein. These deputies were required to wear suits and checked in welcomed guests at the front desk. Later, the sheriff's office said these guest logs were destroyed as per the department's records retention rules. Epstein was also allowed to use his own driver to drive him between jail and his office and other appointments. In the end, Epstein served almost 13 months before being released for a year of probation. He was placed on house arrest until August 2010. While on probation, he was allowed numerous trips on his corporate jet to his residences in Manhattan and the US Virgin Islands. He was allowed long shopping trips and to walk around Palm Beach for exercise. After a contested hearing in January 2011 and an appeal, he stayed registered in New York State as a Level 3 sex offender, meaning that he was considered a high risk of repeat offense. This status would be a lifelong designation. Since he was in a maelstrom of trouble, Epstein opted to capitalize on the deviant ways of his clients and acquaintances to line his pockets with whatever monies could be generated. It was during this time that Epstein installed concealed cameras in various places on his properties as a means to record sexual activity with underage girls by prominent people for criminal purposes, such as blackmail. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's close companion, told a friend that Epstein's private island in the Virgin Islands was completely wired for video, and the friend believed that Maxwell and Epstein were videotaping everyone on the island as an insurance policy. Epstein's mansion in New York was said to be wired extensively with a video surveillance system. Epstein allegedly lent girls to powerful people to ingratiate himself with them and also to gain possible blackmail information.
One Prilosec OTC each morning blocks heartburn all day and all night. Prilosec OTC reduces excess acid for 24 hours, blocking heartburn before it starts. One pill a day, 24 hours, zero heartburn.
To gain possible blackmail information. According to the Department of Justice, Epstein kept a cache of compact discs locked in his safe in his New York mansion with handwritten labels that included the description, young girl's name plus the client's name. Epstein partially confirmed that he had blackmail material when he, off the record, told a New York Times reporter in 2018 that he had dirt on powerful people, including information regarding their sexual tendencies and recreational drug use. Years had passed, but just like a leopard, an animal's spots cannot be changed. On July 6, 2019, Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey on sex trafficking charges. He was jailed at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City, which has held prisoners such as John Gotti, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, and Paul Manafort. According to witnesses and sources on the day of Epstein's arrest, about a dozen FBI agents forced open the door to his Manhattan townhouse with Reddit search warrants. The search of his townhouse turned up evidence of sex trafficking and also found hundreds, and perhaps thousands, of sexually suggestive photographs of fully or partially nude females. Some of the images were confirmed as those of underage females. In a locked safe, compact discs were found with handwritten labels with various incriminating descriptions. Also found in the safe was $70,000 in cash, 48 diamonds, and a fraudulent Austrian passport which expired in 1987. The passport had numerous entrance and exit stamps, including entrance stamps that showed the use of the passport to enter France, Spain, the United Kingdom, and Saudi Arabia in the 1980s. On July 8, 2019, prosecutors with the Public Corruption Unit of the Southern District of New York charged Epstein with sex trafficking and conspiracy to traffic minors for sex. The grand jury indictment alleged that literally dozens of underage girls were brought into Epstein's mansions for sexual encounters. Judge Kenneth Mara was then tasked to decide whether the non-prosecution agreement that protected Epstein from the more serious charges should still stand. Epstein's lawyers pleaded with the court to allow Epstein to post bail. They offered to post up to $600 million in bond, which included $100 million from his brother Mark, so he could leave jail and submit to house arrest in his New York City mansion. Thankfully, United States District Judge Richard M. Berman denied the request on July the 18th, saying that Epstein posed a danger to the public and a serious flight risk to avoid prosecution. The worm had begun to turn. On July the 23rd, 2019, Epstein was found injured and semi-conscious at 1:30 a.m. on the floor of his cell. He had serious marks around his neck that were suspected to be the result of either a suicide attempt or an assault. His then cellmate, former New York City police officer Nicholas Tartaglione, who was charged with 4 counts of murder, was questioned about Epstein's condition. He denied having any knowledge of what happened. Epstein himself said he recollected nothing. According to NBC News, 2 sources said that Epstein might have tried to hang himself, a third said the injuries were not serious and could have been staged, and a 4th source said that an assault by his cellmate had not been ruled out. After that incident, Epstein was placed on suicide watch. Just 6 days later, on July the 29th, Epstein was taken off suicide watch and placed in a special housing unit with another inmate. Epstein's close associates referred to him as in good spirits. The jail informed the Justice Department when Epstein was placed in the special housing unit that he would have a cellmate and that a guard would check in on Epstein's cell every 30 minutes. These procedures were not followed on the night of his death. On August the 9th, Epstein's cellmate was transferred out and there was never a replacement cellmate brought in. Later in the evening, in violation of the jail's normal procedures, Epstein was not checked every 30 minutes. The 2 guards who were assigned to check his jail unit that night were said to have fallen asleep, rendering them incapable of checking in on him for about 3 hours. It was revealed later that the guards falsified related records. 2 cameras in front of Epstein's cell were also said to have malfunctioned that night. Epstein was found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City at 6:30 a.m. EDT on August the 10th, 2019. The Bureau of Prisons said life-saving measures commenced immediately upon the discovery of Epstein's body. Emergency responders were called in and he was rushed to a hospital. On August the 10th, the Bureau of Prisons and U.S. Attorney General William Barr called the death an apparent suicide, although no final determination had been made. Due to violations of normal jail procedures on the night of his death, such as the aforementioned removal of his cellmate without a replacement, the falling asleep of 2 guards who were meant to check in on him, the malfunction of 2 cameras in front of his cell, along with Epstein's knowledge of compromising information about famous people, his death generated doubt about his apparent suicide, and speculation immediately touched off that he was murdered. Before he died, Epstein was reportedly depositing funds into other prisoners' accounts as a means to gain favor with them or buy protection. Days before his death, on August the 8th, Jeffrey Epstein signed his last will and testament. The signing of the will was witnessed by 2 attorneys who knew him. His will named 2 long-time employees as executors and immediately gifted all of his assets and any assets remaining in his estate to a trust. An autopsy of Epstein's body was conducted on August the 11th by New York City's chief medical examiner, Barbara Sampson. Epstein's lawyers also sent famed pathologist Michael Baden to personally observe the city's autopsy. Following the procedure, the medical examiner's office reported that Epstein had indeed hung himself using a sheet from his bed. The preliminary result of the autopsy concluded that Epstein had sustained multiple breaks in his neck bones. Among the bones broken in Epstein's neck was the hyoid bone. Such breaks of the hyoid bone can occur from those who hang themselves, but they are more common in victims of homicide by strangulation. A 2010 study found broken hyoids in 1/4 of cases of hangings, and a larger study conducted from the year 2010 to 2016 found hyoid damage in just 16 of 264 cases. This equates to just 6% of cases of hangings. Hyoid bone breaks are more common in older individuals as bones become more brittle upon reaching middle age. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht noted that hanging by leaning forward would not result in broken cervical bones. Multiple studies have found different percentages for both manners of death, thus yielding any clear picture of what transpired that night in his cell, the cause for much debate and speculation. Epstein's estate independent pathologist Michael Baden, who was at the examination, was unable to discuss the result since, as of August the 16th, he was bound by a gagging order from the medical examiner's office and Epstein's estate. Epstein's lawyers released a joint statement following the report of the medical examiner, expressing that they are not satisfied with the results of the autopsy, challenging the conclusions, and saying